Jersey Governor Chris Christie delivered a fiery speech at the convention last night, essentially putting Hillary Clinton on a mock trial. The former prosecutor laying out a case against her policies as Secretary of State and about the FBI investigation into her private email server. On day 3 here, the New Jersey governor, who heads the Trump transition team, continues to rally for his longtime friend and former competitor. Earlier today, Governor Christie sat down with me to make a case for the Republican presidential nominee. I asked him about the reluctance of the Trump campaign to acknowledge that parts of Melania Trump's speech had been plagiarized and what this might say about Trump's leadership style.
I don't know what the dynamic is that's going on inside the Trump household right now, but I know Melania pretty well. And I know Melania's a very private person, really intelligent, really cares about Donald, loves him and loves her son. And now, you know, there's all this stuff from a speech that she probably didn't want to give in the first place that is demeaning to her, even by extension. So part of what people can't forget about people in public life is we have a private life. We go home and our wives don't treat us like the governor or the congressman or, you know.
Trust me on this,
right?
This is true. Yeah.
Or the presidential candidate or this, that, like, you're the guy I married when no one knew who the hell you were and nobody cared what you said and nobody wanted a picture of you on the street. That personal interaction, I spoke to Donald a little bit last night, but we didn't get into this topic. But I'm going to see him later today, and I'm sure we will. And we'll talk based on our relationship as friends and as husbands. And I will tell you, it would make me enormously uncomfortable if a member of my staff had done that to my wife. And negotiating that triangle between, in politics, family, candidate, staff. And any politician who's achieved anything in this country will tell you that that is a love triangle. It just is.
ISIS is obviously a huge concern among the American people, and I guess there's a confusion, I think, about what specifically would Donald Trump do differently in terms of specifics. He says he would bomb the hell out of ISIS. He says that we need to have better intelligence along those lines. But he's also said that he would not have very many troops. There are about 4,000 troops in Iraq, and U.S. troops in Iraq and Syria right now. In terms of the threat there, and in terms of the threat here, what are the specifics as to what he would do differently?
I do think he'll wind up having to commit more troops there, and I think, but that's something I think that he'll have to come to the conclusion on as he continues to get more regular briefings that he will do now as the nominee. He'll be in now access to intelligence that he simply doesn't have now. And my experience with Donald has been when you sit and you talk with him dispassionately about facts, he listens, he absorbs it, and then it alters his view of particular topics. I think that's what we want in political leaders, folks who are willing to listen and are not wed to having to do one thing in one particular way, because I said it 6 months ago on State of the Union. You know, you got to be able to go, okay, well, I now have new facts and that make me want to change my position.
We also discussed the fact that Senator Ted Cruz has yet to endorse Donald Trump, even though he is speaking this evening. And Governor Christie made a very strong argument that Cruz needs to endorse Donald Trump tonight in his speech.
If you want to sign the pledge, adhere to the pledge. And I just think you're supposed to keep your word. And I think that's part of the problem and part of the continued friction. So I hope Ted Cruz gets up tonight when he speaks at the convention and keeps his word and endorses Donald Trump. He should, and especially the way he was kissing Donald's rear end for the first 6 months of the campaign. I mean, all of us were kind of, I mean, seriously, right? Okay, they're doing rallies together on Capitol Hill, and I mean, seriously, they don't understand that Donald's not a politician. He thought Ted really meant it. He thought Ted was being honest when he said all these nice things about Donald. And then all of a sudden he starts attacking Donald. And I remember Donald called me. He's like, I thought this guy liked me. I said, he never liked you. Are you kidding? He never liked you. He's faking it. So I hope that Ted ends that tonight and keeps his word and endorses Trump tonight. And if he doesn't, then he's less of a person than he presents himself to be to the American people.